Hey everybody, welcome back to Princess Friend. I'm your host, Princess Friend, and today I am bringing you a really cool interview via the interwebs with somebody who you are not a stranger to. If you've watched the judges panel video on Prince's Best Drummers, you
Mhm.
already know this gentleman. His name is Zac Hoskins, and
Hi.
he is the proprietor or the person who does, I don't even know what you would say. Um,
I guess
anyway,
author, I guess. Yeah.
author.
Yeah.
I think, I think that works. He does princesongs.org. So welcome to the show again.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks so much for having me. It was fun doing the judges panel and yeah, I think this will be fun too.
Now, the interesting thing is that we didn't even know each other before the judges panel. I got hip to you through Darling Nisi of Muse to the
Right.
Pharaoh.
Mm-hmm.
Because I sent her an invite to do that one, and she said, "I don't have time, but I know this amazing guy named
Yeah.
Zac. So can he do it instead?" And I was like, "Yeah, sure, that sounds great." As soon as I went and checked out the princesongs.org, I mean, it was. You're doing really cool stuff over there, and it's continued on since then. I think that video was months ago.
Right.
Um, so I mean, I guess the main question is, tell us about princesongs.org. Like, what do you do there? Like the general overview of this.
Sure. So I've been kind of dwelling in obscurity, which is partly sort of by choice. So I got started with this project. I want to say around the time that you did.
Okay.
I wasn't watching your stuff right from the beginning, but I think you started probably a couple months after
It was
April
about
of
a month. It was
2016.
like about a month after. Yeah.
Right. And I think that's kind of interesting because a lot of people that I know sort of in the community who have who are creators in some way, who are writers or video makers or podcasters, whether they had a project before or not, that kind of moment when Prince died was like a kind of a catalyst for their creative work.
Yeah.
And so I've that's something that I've definitely noticed. I got started, the blog launched in June 2016, and around Prince's, what would have been Prince's birthday. I got started, I started writing a little bit before that. And I think so basically, I guess let me back up and actually explain what it is that I do. Yeah, the URL is princesongs.org. It's also called Dance Music Sex Romance. I kind of use them interchangeably. It is a blog where I'm trying to write about um, every Prince, I guess we'll say recording, because he has, so many songs that we'll never get to hear. But every Prince song that I am able to hear, I'm writing about. In order of, I mean, roughly in order of recording, in order of release. It kind of depends on what makes the most sense, given, what's accessible. And it also, when you're writing about songs in order, it kind of turns into a narrative. So sometimes it's what makes sense based on the kind of telling the story of
Yeah, that was one of the
his
cool
career.
things. That was one of the cool things that I really dug about it because it's similar to what I'm doing here, where I'm going in order of his album releases because, like you said, like it does create a certain narrative, like
Right.
with his personal life, but also spiritual growth and all of those different things, and it becomes like this weird beast.
So like right now, I've been making very slow progress. Like I said, I started in 2016, and I have been trying not to put too much pressure on myself to like get there, because it's a marathon. Like this is going to be, I knew from the beginning that if I get to the end, this is going to be like just a huge, this is my novel, this is a
Yeah.
huge project that like, no matter, even if I was working faster than I am, it would take me years and years to get there. So, I'm trying to be relatively you know, you don't want to be taking months between posts, which there have been a couple times where I have done that, but just because of life interfering. But, you know, you want some level of regularity, but you don't want to burn yourself out either, because it is just such a big project. And, you know, you can kind of tell, like, some weeks I try to do roughly a post a week. Some weeks are going to be, you know, like the bootleg track, Strange Way of Saying I Love You, is probably not going to be as to get as much interest as you know, Little Red Corvette, which I actually haven't done yet, but I have a feeling that that's going to be one of the ones that people will be naturally interested in, or Head, which I have done, or Controversy. You know, those are posts that I think have seen a lot more interest from people, and I'm sure that obviously I think people are going to start paying attention, you know, who haven't already been paying attention, obviously, when I hit Purple Rain, you know, so that's probably going to be the one that a lot of people have been waiting for.
I mean, I don't know. I think 1999 might get you.
Yeah, I'm actually excited about 1999.
Yeah.
Which I'm just kind of on the cusp of now, because that's another thing. So I made this decision early on, and I guess first of all, I give credit where credit is due. I 100% stole this idea from another blog that did the same thing with David Bowie's music. It actually recently ended. It's called Pushing Ahead of the Dame, and you can find that on bowiesongs.wordpress.com. I say I stole the idea. It's obviously different because we're, you know, different writers, different perspectives, different artists that we're covering. So I think it turned into a different beast, but it's you know, I'm blatantly influenced by that process of kind of creating a narrative out of these songs, viewed, you know, from a single artist in chronological order. And one of the things that Bowie songs did that I knew that I wanted to do is, he didn't just write about David Bowie's solo albums. He wrote about the songs that Bowie wrote for other people, or he wrote about cover songs that Bowie did. He wrote about the Iggy Pop albums that David Bowie produced, because those are, you know, kind of just as important in David Bowie's career as the albums that Bowie was putting out at the time. And that, I think, is a big parallel with Prince. Like, to me, you know, especially those early Protege albums, you know, the first couple of Time albums, Vanity 6, Apollonia 6, the first couple of Sheila E. albums, those are secret Prince albums. And a lot of them have, you know, really great songs. Like, to me, I think, you know, Nasty Girl and 777-9311 are just kind of as integral to that 1982 Prince canon as a lot of the stuff on 1999 is. So I knew early on that, even though it was, again, creating more work for myself, I knew that I wanted to talk about these associated acts also. So, you know, so that's kind of where I am right now as we record this. I am in the 1999 era, broadly speaking, but what I'm actually talking about is what time is it? You know, so January 1982, Prince, on a break from the Controversy tour, goes to Sunset Sound in LA, and he starts recording with Morris Day. He starts recording the songs that will become What Time Is It, the second Time album.
Yeah.
And, you know, so it's really interesting to kind of, and it's interesting for me as a fan to, you know, because I mean, obviously we've all listened to the albums a million times, but when you go and, you know, check, you look at the chronology on princevault.com, for example, which is another website that I have to give credit to, because I do not have the research acumen to, you know, like I'm really kind of standing on the shoulders of people who have done much more boring research than I am ever to commit to.
Whenever I'm doing my reviews, like, oh my gosh, like Prince Vault is up.
Right. And so then you think about it chronologically, you know, and you start thinking about the projects differently. I mean, one of the big things, I haven't gotten there yet, but one of the big things that I discovered when I was reading Dwayne Tudall's book on the Purple Rain studio sessions is that, you know, Around the World in a Day was basically recorded when the Purple Rain tour started. So, you know, when you find out things like that, it gives you a different window on the music.
Yeah.
So I think it's interesting, certainly as a writer, and hopefully it's interesting to readers to kind of you know, reconceptualize these albums as this kind of constant body of work that transcended, that wasn't just on Prince albums, but it was also what he was doing for the time and what he was doing for Vanity Six. And then, you know, obviously later a whole spectrum of other artists.
So you said that you've been kind of trying to post about every week, but you don't just post the things about songs. You sometimes do like news articles and stuff as well, right?
Yeah, every once in a while. I don't do so much news, but I was for a while pretty good about reviewing books as they came out, you know, because since I'm writing this, I'm doing a lot of research, and I'm making an effort to read everything that's coming out. The books have picked up, and I have not. So there's a few that I've missed. I still haven't gotten around to Owen Husney's book. I did read Alan Bolio's book, which you contributed to.
Yeah.
Just because I'm such a fan of Alan Bolio's work, that it was kind of like I needed to drop everything and get that book. You know, so that's the most recent book review that I've done, because that's one that I've just been like, since before it was announced, I was like, oh my God, he needs to do a book. Because
did you do one for Dwayne Tudall's book?
I did, yeah. And I sometimes have I have a podcast that I have been focusing less on, just because I've been trying to kind of get back to the bread and butter of what princesongs.org was when I started with the project, and really, you know, go back to writing about the songs. But I've done podcasts before, and I had Dwayne on for a podcast. That was a fun conversation. You know, got to talk about his process writing the book, and about you know, a little bit about the old like Uptown Magazine days, which is of course where Prince Vault comes from. Where I can fit them in, I've been going back a little bit with the podcast and doing review shows with Darling Nisi, and with another guy who doesn't do much online, but he's done some work like with the Love Sexy 30th anniversary conference. He's just a really smart guy named Harold Pride. I really just, you know, his perspectives I think are always great. So I get together with him and Kanisa, Darling Nisi, and they basically tell me where my opinions were wrong about the about the albums. You know, because I like to get different perspectives. I'm very conscious that as I'm writing about each of these songs, this is very much my opinion. And, you know, I try to also make it interesting for people to read, whether it's my, you know, whether they agree with my opinions or not. I try to kind of wrap in a lot of factual information and, you know, background and what else was going on in the music industry and what else was going on in Prince's life. And, you know, it's not just, I'm very conscious of not making it just like, this is my opinion, but you know, as you're aware, Prince fans, we all like the music, but there's just like a bewildering array of perspectives that you can have on the same songs, you know, and I'll find that like, I'll have a lot of praise for something like Do Me Baby. And then, you know, I'll get a comment that is like, I thought Do Me Baby was the worst song on Controversy, you know, like, or, you know, I've met people who they really love Annie Christian on Controversy. And I did not have a lot of kind things to say about Annie Christian, despite, you know, being like a kind of new wave post-punk guy. I was not like super blown away by that track. So, you know, the range of opinions is amazing. And that's something that, even though it's a one-man project, and obviously in the end, it's going to be my opinions making the blog, I try to make room for other people's perspective. Again, it's a long haul, and I don't want it to turn into like, oh God, here's, you know, Zach ragging on another 12 Prince songs,
you don't want it to be adversarial, right?
Exactly.
You know?
Exactly.
I mean, I run a YouTube channel, so there's constantly people in the comments telling me how wrong I am, so, which is fine sometimes. So what's the next one that you're about to do?
I think at the time that we're recording this, The most recent, I'm still in What Time Is It? The most recent was Gigolos Get Lonely Too. And next up should be Wild and Loose, which is going to be an interesting one. I love the song. It's the opening track of What Time It Is. What Time Is It? It's a really funky, it's a lot of fun. I think it's probably one of my favorite time songs. I think, Wild and Loose is a song that Des Dickerson originally wrote the lyrics to, and Prince, similar to what Des did for, I think, Cool. Prince was like, "Hey Des, can you write these lyrics for me?" And he sent them to Prince. And in the case of Wild and Loose, Prince made them kind of a lot more scandalous, and Des was a little taken aback by this. And so I think, there's something to kind of look at there about like Prince kind of deliberately pushing the envelope. I hope that I'm going to handle it in a tasteful way.
It's interesting because it feels like me and you are similar in our fandom, friendom, famdom, whatever you want to call it. Like I got into him, Graffiti Bridge, early 90s. And then I went back and started my journey through Prince music and whatnot. Can you tell me a little bit about how, you got into his music and his messages and everything that Prince is about?
So I was born in August 84. So, Prince was always just kind of in the atmosphere that I grew up in. He was like a presence on MTV and on the radio, the same as Michael Jackson and Madonna.
Right.
And, so growing up, I remember things like the Kiss video. I obviously remember, I was 5 when Batman came out. So like looking back at the Batman movie that we actually got, not actually the ideal age for that, like very PG-13 Batman movie, but I was into Batman in '89. And so I remember Bat Dance, and, yes. I remember the Batman soundtrack. And then I didn't really get into him until I was in like late high school, early college. And then it was really sort of like going back and discovering the 80s stuff that I missed, like the 1999 album. And even then it took some time because, 80s music was sort of like, it was not cool in the mid 2000s. I feel like now there's kind of like or it was sort of like getting cool at that point in time because you had, a lot of contemporary bands that were very much doing the new wave thing. And that was also when Prince kind of made his musicology comeback. So that was kind of the wave that I caught, like rediscovering Prince around that time of when he was kind of re-entering the mainstream. So it all kind of dovetailed. I was able to go see him a couple times on the musicology tour. Then it was kind of like, I've always listened to a ton of different music. Like I wouldn't describe myself as a massive Prince fan first and foremost, honestly, until fairly recently. Like I've always been very kind of Catholic in my music taste. So, in college, I rediscovered Prince, and I, really, really kind of recognized how great he was, and went back and was listening to mostly the 80s stuff. The 90s stuff still didn't really hit with me at that time. Honestly, it's taken me a long time to appreciate a lot of his catalog. I've gone back and forth. I bought 3121 when it came out. I liked it, but it felt a little like adult contemporary to me at the time. There's always been like a block in me fully like getting into his stuff. And I think part of that is because, so I've always been someone who's listened to older music. When I was growing up, I was not necessarily listening to like what was on the charts at the time. I was going back and discovering, the Beatles and the Rolling Stones, and and discovering this music that wasn't really for my generation. So I've always been on a lag, like an even longer lag than Prince. I would kind of every couple of years go and check in on his new music. Like I said, I bought 3121. I liked it, but it was always like, is this as good as 1999 or Sign of the Times? No, not really. You know, I was kind of like one of those kind of fans, you know.
No, I feel
wasn't-
I mean,
I wasn't really one of these like true believer, like MPG Music Club, going to Paisley Park, like,
yeah,
you know, and I've met people since then. And you know, part of me, I wish I'd had that experience. Like, honestly, it would have been amazing if I had been, you know, maybe a little less snobby in my music taste. And if I had been into Prince, you know, around the first Celebration period when he was like super accessible and you could go to
yeah,
Paisley Park and have this kind of experience like what Celebration is now, except Prince was there and he's
right.
like, you know, sitting there talking to you about Jehovah and stuff like that. You know, like
It's interesting because like I listened to like a lot of stuff that was just kind of around at the time. So it's basically what my mom listened to.
right.
So and you know, my mom listened to Prince, but she also listened to a lot of rock. She listened to like
Mhm.
a lot of hair metal, Cher, Madonna, you know, Eric Clapton, like that was the stuff. The Beatles and Queen were really big in my household
Mhm.
as well. So like I listened to a lot of that stuff, but it wasn't until Graffiti Bridge that my mom was like, "Hey, this is Prince's new album. Like, go listen to it, see if you
Right.
like it." And I was like, "Okay, I will." You know, I'm just a kid. And then it hooked me, and then I just went crazy with it. And then it became a thing where I started viewing music through my Princedom. Every new Prince album that came out, I did a lot of the same. That I would be like, I don't know if I like this as much, you know. And
Mhm.
then, you know, I'd listen to it again and I'd be like, okay, I think I get what he's going for here. And I listened to it again and again and again. And then eventually, like, whatever the last album was now my new favorite. You know, so that's kind of weird how that works. You know, the more you listen to it and the more you absorb it, like the better it gets. But it has to have something there to grab you.
Right.
It can't just be, you know, you have to force yourself to listen to it. Obviously.
Yeah. And you know, I think I know that like this isn't necessarily your experience. It may not necessarily be a lot of the people watching's experience, but I know a lot of people both in and out of the like fan community who you know, if we're really honest with ourselves, Prince was he was easy to take for granted when he was alive because he was
Mhm.
so amazing for so long. You can see this in the like sort of contemporary critical reactions to his music. It's sort of like, yeah, you can play a million instruments and like everything you do is great. Like, so what? You know, like was kind of the attitude. And in retrospect, it's like kind of it's crazy that that we felt that way. I do think that I personally took him for granted. You know,
Mhm.
and there were times when he would like come to DC and it's like, do I want to spend $150 to see Prince do a show where he doesn't play head or swear, you know, like, and like for me as a fan of his early work, it was kind of like, this is more like he's more of a family artist now, you know,
Yeah.
and like now, like looking back, it's like, God, I should have gone and seen those shows. Like, who
You are not
cares
alone
where
in
his
that.
head was at? Like, you
Yeah.
know, I think it's so and so a big part of this project for me was honestly like going back and filling in the gaps that I missed when I was this kind of fair weather fan, you know, and I wasn't really I wasn't really checking for every album or I wasn't really appreciating every album. And I think
Yeah.
this kind of like, you know, I found myself after he died, like really kind of going back and listening to his full catalog in ways that I hadn't done before. I have that like millennial freelancer disease of like, okay, this is what I'm doing in my free time. How can I turn this into content? Which I think is
Right.
part of why it became a blog.
Right.
And, you know, it's also like, oh, this is really like sustained writing project. And this is a way for me to kind of write through it sounds, you know, sort of melodramatic to say my grief. But, you know, I think a lot of people in the community can relate to this. You know, we were all kind of like in a funk after Prince died, thinking about like what he had meant to us, you know, whether we were hardcore fans the whole way or not.
Yeah.
I think he touched our lives in a lot of really intimate ways. And and touched our music listening in a lot of really kind of profound and intimate ways. And so writing through that and kind of turning it into this like sustained project, I thought would be a really interesting way to to really look at this full catalog in a way that I'd listened to his full catalog before, but I hadn't really listened to it, because when you're going through and thinking about the connections and thinking about what's going on with his life at this point in time and what's going on in music at this point in time, these albums that might not have appealed to you just as entertainment necessarily might appeal to you in different ways. Like Emancipation is not an album that when I was in my 20s and I was going through Prince's discography for the first time, I didn't get it, because I was in my 20s. And this is an album about like specifically about a guy in his mid 30s getting married and having a kid, and the music and the lyrics very much reflect that. Now that I'm in my mid 30s and I've been married and I have a kid, it's like I understand it more. It's still not necessarily the album that I'm gonna like choose to listen to. I'm probably between Emancipation and Sign of the Times, I'm gonna go with Sign of the Times, but it's a really interesting record and it really has a lot of interesting things to say about Prince's life during that period. Obviously his struggles with the recording industry, which is honestly huge, and something that is so fascinating to look at in retrospect now that the recording industry has completely changed, irrevocably. So there's a lot when you look at this kind of larger body of work, there's a lot to engage with, I think, above and beyond the music.
I will say that I've been boning up on Emancipation. I've listened to it at least 6 or 7 times this week in full, because I'm boning up because those are the next reviews that I'm on.
Right.
Is Emancipation. And I am like, I've always loved the album and I always love even the individual songs. I love the songs, but like listening to it with the intent to dissect it and, to really kind of pick it apart and figure out what's going on and all. Pretty much everything you said, it does actually lend itself to a much higher level of appreciation for the music that it is. And a lot of people sleep on Emancipation because a lot of people are turned off by 3 hours of music.
Yeah, it's a lot.
It's a lot. And it's daunting to do, but oh my God, like if you just give it a shot, not to you, because obviously you have, but like anybody who's listening, if you just give it a shot, like, oh my God, you're gonna love it. Who else do you listen to besides Prince? I see Grace Jones. I see Bjork behind you.
I've got a little bit. Some of those are my girlfriend's albums. Some of them are mine. These are some of the artists. It's I collect records. I also do a little bit of freelance music writing. I've actually been trying to do less of that so I can focus more on the blog. Like I said, I grew up in suburban Michigan as kind of like a classic rock guy. So yeah, I was really into the Beatles. Like the Beatles are kind of like, they become part of your DNA. Like I honestly don't listen to the Beatles much anymore because I just listen to them so much that it's like, they're just hardwired into my brain. I'm probably more of a Rolling Stones guy now. Like every Midwestern teenager, I had my like Led Zeppelin phase. So I really came in, I came into like music appreciation from like a classic rock perspective. Okay. Which is maybe one reason why the 80s stuff was what grabbed me first with Prince, because that's the canon, right? That's what the critical consensus is. Like, these are his great works, Purple Rain, Sign of the Times, Parade, stuff like that.
Is there anything that you want to approach or talk about that I didn't ask?
No, I think this pretty much covers it. Thanks so much for having me. If you're watching this and you haven't checked out the blog, I think please do. I have a small but dedicated following, and I I'm always happy to make it a larger but still dedicated following.
And now that's princesongs.org.
Yes.
But is there any other way that they can interact with you?
Yeah, so you can so I'm on Twitter as myself. It's at ZC Hoskins, ZCHOSKINS. Like Facebook is more personal, but you can I post all of the Prince song stuff on Facebook through this my sister and I have like this side project podcast magazine thing called Dystopian Dance Party.
Okay.
And that's kind of like Prince. I use that to post the links for dance music, sex, romance. So you can find Dystopian Dance Party, and that's where you can find all of my Prince stuff there, as well as other stuff that my sister and I do. And then I guess I'm still hanging on to the Tumblr thing, even though it seems like everybody's leaving Tumblr. You can find me there on both Dystopian Dance Party and my personal Tumblr is Fever in the Funk House. If you can.
Okay. Well, thank you so much for being on here and coming and talking with us. Hopefully everybody will go check out princesongs.org. Obviously, you can go check out Prince's Friend, Twitter and Instagram. It's at PrincessFriendYT. You can check out the Patreon at patreon.com/princessfriend. And until next time, may you live to see the dawn, everybody.